All right, welcome divas and dudes. I'm Suzanne Parker, and we have been talking about, I think, a very telling topic, and I think it's been in the front of minds for many years for lots of people, and there's still a lot of confusion around kind of what the data says and what real life says. And so our task, as always, here in our classes is to try to look at science, put on our science hats, and really try to understand what does a deep dive look like into something that touches all of us, and that is plants, phytonutrients, and the world of medicine, and how do we really decipher how this information will benefit us, or even perhaps not benefit us and be counterproductive in our goal of wellness. So what I wanted to look at today was phytonutrients in the form of hormone-like substances, so phytoestrogens, and then specifically around postmenopausal health. When we think about postmenopausal health, we think of some symptoms that are uncomfortable, but we also think of sort of our far-reaching wellness paradigms as we get into our 50s and 60s and beyond, as our body's estrogen starts to decline. And really, what does that do to our other organs? Our organs being bones and our cardiovascular system, our neurochemistry, so our nervous system, not to mention things like, our sensitivity to temperature, so hot flashes, and even the occurrence of weight gain. So how do all of these symptoms that we kind of put into the category of, oh, well, it's age, how do we put that into, no, we're not going to just age. We want to do everything we can to minimize risk. And of course, really specifically in this group is how do we also minimize our risk of recurrence of cancer? And so for me, that's something that I really want us to be able to understand as science continues to develop and we tend to, learn about new discoveries, but also really understand more fully the research that's out there, because so much is out there. And what happens is the medical community, as well as the health community, so those that sell and procure supplements and nutraceuticals, they all make decisions for us based on this information that we get to look at as scientists. So my hope is that I can equip you with the way to look at information from the source, versus looking at what does the pill bottle or the supplement bottle tell us, or what does the different physicians tell us. How do we get that information and really understand its relevance, its efficacy, and so relevance to our personal situation, and efficacy, does it really do what we think or hope it's going to do? When we look at health food and alternative therapies, complementary supplements, look at that number, $14 billion industry. So you've heard me talk about this topic before when we have had our classes at Powerhouse Bakery. The health and wellness arena is huge because we all want to understand how to improve our health. That's something that's, of course, universal. Even when we look way back into ancient Chinese medicine, even Indians, in different parts of the country and the world, all cultures and civilizations are looking for ways to improve our health. So that hasn't changed. But what has changed is our science gets deeper and deeper. And we laymen have a hard time understanding it. And so who do we trust? And I think that is a smoking gun that I want us to be able to be good researchers on our own so that we can understand, what does it mean to be harmless? What does it mean to have something that's healthy because it's natural? Healthy doesn't always mean that it's natural and it's going to be harmless to us. And I think that's a really important point. How often have we looked at a label and said, oh, it's all natural? Our first inclination should be, so Cyanide's natural. Is that healthy? Of course not. So I want us to be skeptical, and I want us to ask good questions, and I want us to know how to pose those questions so that we're getting pertinent information. Of course, we don't want to be inflammatory, but we do want to understand where do we get our information and how do we make it pertinent to us. Okay? So research, for starters, is really demanding good design. And so a lot of you that have come to these classes on a regular basis know that I'm a scientist at heart. At Powerhouse Bakery, I love to dig in and learn about food combinations, but I also love the science around learning. So when I was a research coordinator, and even in my master's program in Georgia, what we looked at was how to determine what is a good research study. So what is a placebo-controlled study? What does it mean to be randomized? What does it mean to be double-blind? Anybody ever heard of these terms? Yes?
Yes.
What do you think?
I don't know really what they mean.
Okay, well then, pen in hand, let's talk about it. So a placebo is a fantastic term. So in my master's work, what I looked at was ergogenic aids. Athletes take something. They think it's going to help them. You've probably heard of a pre-workout, or you've heard of a protein shake. The idea is I'm going to take this and I'm going to get better. What I found in my research was all of the money spent on these ergogenic aids, placebo effect was as powerful as the active ingredient. That is the same scenario that we're finding with many other supplements. So if we're going to have a good research program, we want it to be balanced with neutral. So if we take a pill and it's neutral, and then we also take a pill that has active ingredient, now we have a placebo and we have the active ingredient. Sorry, if I don't keep my finger on that, it wants to go away. So I think what's really important, and there we go. Sorry. So placebo is important. Controlled is, what I've just mentioned, that for sure it has some way to understand what is neutral versus the effect of the medicine or the product. Randomized means that the people in the study are not put into a study that would tip it in the scales. So like when I looked at my athletes and I wanted there to be, an outcome of great muscle growth, I'm going to make sure I pad my group that's going to take the active ingredient that I know are just genetically endowed with great biceps. I wish you could see my husband. He has great biceps. They just pop. I mean, some guys, they work out forever and they get this little bloop. I don't know, for him, they're huge. And so his genetics gave him a predisposition to burly biceps, which I love. But not everybody has that. So if I were to have a randomized group and I'm looking for muscle growth, I would have to just randomly put my husband in a group. I wouldn't want to put him in the active group, on purpose. Double blind, what do you think that means? That means that me, the researcher, I don't know which pill is placebo and which pill is active. And I also don't know of my subjects who's in what group. That way I won't tend to have an influence. So when I worked as a research coordinator here in San Antonio, I worked on a study for leptin. Have you ever heard of that, leptin? So interesting. I mean, truly back then we thought we found it. We found the secret. We've been able to extract this hormone in the human body, inject it into people, and lo and behold, it decreases appetite, it improves weight loss. Yay, we found it. And then guess what happened? At month 3, almost like clockwork, we could tell which group got the medicine because we saw the weight loss and then bloop, it stopped and it went back up. And so it was sad that didn't find an answer to weight loss or the problems with weight gain because the body is so good, it's able to adjust to some medicines. So when we have a double-blind study, we might see some trend in data, but we don't know who got what. And so the leptin studies were based that way. It was very well-run studies, but we had to stop the study because we realized that the effects were very specific. They only would work for a very specific amount of time. So when we look at studies, we know that we have to have a good setup to minimize risk of incorrect or invalid results, right? So when we go back, though, when we think of, well, when we're trying to understand a medicine and we want to think of efficacy and safety, we're measuring efficacy when we want to look at a medicine and see if it's going to, make biceps grow. The other big piece is it safe? So safety and efficacy is always what we're looking at. And so I think an important point is some researchers say there's 4, harms when we say harmless. So, we think, okay, natural is harmless, right? Because it's from nature. It's certainly not going to hurt you. I might as well take black cohosh because it's not going to hurt me. Maybe it'll help me. I'll just, have a little insurance and take it just in case, right? With that mindset, there are some dangers, and that's what I want you to see here. Because we have found that there are risks in taking medicines or even taking supplements. Now, fortunately, medicines are very well controlled. Supplements, because they fall into a different category, are not very well supervised. And really, the public has asked for that, oddly enough. So when we think of possible harm, it's because it's not a well-controlled world out there, whereas medicines are better. They still have some risk, but supplementation is more risky. And there really can be some organ damage. So when I comb through the research, I see that there are some risks of organ damage. What organs do you think I'm referring to when I'm talking about taking vitamin supplements or things like most postmenopausal supplements like black cohosh and St. John's wort? Any ideas? Yeah. Yes, exactly. Liver and kidney, right. And why is that? What happens in the liver?
They're filtering.
Exactly. The liver is so amazing. So not only does it filter every bite of food that we eat, the first thing it does is get broken down to a point and goes straight to the liver and gets kind of cleansed. Same thing with every medicine and every supplement that we take goes into our liver. So if you know somebody that has a diagnosis of fatty liver or has elevated liver enzymes, they're compromised. Or if they've ever had hepatitis or, other situations with the liver. And you might not know that you're one of them, and you're taking some supplements, and little do we know that it could be a serious harm to your liver because it gets contact with those products right away. Kidney also, because again, kidney is very responsible for filtering and cleansing the body. Cost is an easy one. In fact, many products, just to prove to the buyer that they're valuable, their price goes 4, 10, 20 times what it costs to make it. In Powerhouse Bakery, when we're developing a recipe, we think of, food costs, labor costs, overhead costs, and then we try to make a profit. So we think, if the product costs $10 to make, let's charge 20, that's double, that's going to cover our costs, our overhead. When products are being made for the pharmaceutical industry that is non-regulated, like black cohosh or soy supplementation or vitamins or collagen, they think about what would make the public feel like this is valuable. And so it's a competitive world. If Group A charges $10 for their product, Group B is going to go, well, we want the public to think that this is more important, so we're going to charge $20. People are going to buy that one because who looks for products like this? Well, usually people that have resources to be able to spend on this. And so more cost must mean that it's more valuable, right? Is that erroneous thinking? Of course it is. But that is exactly what happens in the industry. So cost is definitely a risk. Deselecting a more effective option. So again, if we're trying to go healthy, and I know many people that say, well, I don't like taking medicines. In fact, I just started with a new client at Powerhouse Bakery. She's a physician. And she says, well, I'm really not good at all at taking my medicine. I just thought, wow. Surprise! But she doesn't like to have side effects. She's worried about the medicine causing weight gain, just like all of us. She's a woman, just like all of us. If we are worried that there's a product that might help us, but it might cause weight gain, we'll be less likely to take it, right? And so then we think, well, maybe I'll just find an all-natural product. It's not going to harm me. Maybe it'll be just as effective, so let's try that one. We all think that way, me included. And then really the risk of disappointment, risk of, gosh, I'm trying everything and it's just not working. And you feel really disillusioned. And I think that's important because we women are always looking for ways to make improvements. And if we feel like we've tried everything, and even that doesn't work, you just feel depressed. You feel like, well, I'm just going to give up. How many have ever felt like that when they're looking for a way to get rid of an allergy, as we're talking about it, or GI upset or headaches? My husband has migraines, and we feel like, gosh, we can't find a good medicine that helps that. You feel depressed, right? That there's nothing out there that's going to help me. And so I feel like that's an important component when we're looking at trying a supplement that might offer what it promises, but there again, might really not. So today what I wanted to look at was just a couple, St. John's wort, black cohosh, and red clover extract. So these products are all sold as a way to help with menopausal symptoms. And what's unique about them is that they seem to have a higher concentration of these all favored isoflavones. These isoflavones, like we've been talking about, do get broken down into their active ingredients, which are the daidzein and the genistein. So again, don't worry too much about the names and the terms. Just know that phytoestrogens are the type of chemical that when it's in our body seems to have different effects, sometimes on different organs, sometimes within people groups, right? So age has a factor, health status. We've talked about how the GI tract has our healthy bacteria that helps to activate and even metabolize some of these isoflavones into their active state, which, remember, is why we talked about last time that when we have research that is kind of confusing, in some cases soy, which is of course a high concentration of daidzein, soy is taken by some, even big people groups like in China, and we see less risk and less incidence of cancer. And then we come to the States and we try to give people soy, and nope, that actually increased the growth of cancer cells. What's wrong with that? You know, how come there's so much confusion in the data? And really what we've learned is that there's just so many factors that go into the concentration and the active ingredient, which is those isoflavones. Simply enough, it could be that when people take it in a pill form, it's much different than a plant form. And I've mentioned that to you in these classes too, that when we try to take a good thing that happens in legumes and berries and whole grains, you know where I'm going with this, the Mediterranean diet, and we try to extract these active ingredients, it doesn't always prove to be as healthy as we'd hoped. And of course, as harmless as we hope as well. And in case it doesn't do what we hope it does, we still have to be careful because it might cause problems. And truly, that's why a lot of the medical community will say, you're a breast cancer patient, I don't want you taking any phytoestrogens. And Mary, I'm going to borrow your flyer because I don't think she gave me a copy. So what I want to do now is go to this little flyer, and I'm going to see if I can pull it up on my screen, because I want you to be able to read along with me. And let's see, I'm going to first show you some of the products. So black cohosh, $31 for this little concentrated bottle. This is what the plant looks like. And you know, it's so fun when you start looking at how did the good Lord make these plants? And how do they evolve into something that is now considered a nutraceutical or something that has, powerful effects. Well, when we look at the makeup of the plant and we look at the plant name and where it's from, it's been around for, thousands of years. Ancient medicine actually uses them. And so all of these things, I think, make it really exciting to know that there are some chemicals that are meant to be valuable in our plant kingdom. So as we look at these plants from the plant kingdom, it makes sense that as humans are evolving and they're trying to find not only things to eat, they're finding that some are good, some are bad, like cyanide, of course. And then we try to figure out what effects different plants have. And so I love the fact that these plants do have that beautiful tall flower. So we know that bees are going to access it for pollination. We know that it grows in forests, both in shaded regions as well as sunny regions. So to me, it's telling me that the plant is really well versed at surviving in the environments that it grows in. It has a way to propagate, and it has some arsenal to protect it from the environment, which is exactly what we want when we eat foods. We want to have chemicals that are now going to help us fight off our environment. And you've heard me talk about the value of phytochemicals, and that's truly what we're trying to accomplish when we're eating our fruits and vegetables and, of course, getting all our nutrients. And so when we look a little deeper into this plant, we understand that it has some bioactive components. And I wanted you to just kind of get to read this on your own, because when you see how it's structured, it's just a plant. It has good properties. It has some woody properties that are non-edible, and it has you can see there the little buds, and so a lot of animals will eat this, just like us being an animal. Depending on how it's cultivated, it will have a stronger plant base versus a weaker. It has a pH level that really helps it to grow. Like I mentioned, it can be in shade as well as sunny areas. So suffice to say that this is an interesting plant nonetheless. And just like when we look at flax and we look at red clover tea, these are items that will grow naturally in some areas, and people groups will eat them. So in China, when they grow their own crops, they don't have H-E-B or Walgreens to go pick up a supplement. They grow crops and eat them, which is probably why we are seeing that for some reason, people that live close to the land have fewer incidents of some cancers, most cancers. We still want to understand, why is it that the Chinese women, when they come to the U.S., they have an increase in cancers, they have an increase in obesity, increase in heart disease. Can we say it's just from the food changes, or is there something about our environment? Honestly, I think we could probably put on our science hat and go probably a little bit of both, right? But I think what's important is that when we understand that plants that grow in an indigenous area and people grow up or are in a culture that uses these foods, they have a long effect, a long-term effect, versus if we start having these items, even if we're just buying flaxseed at age 50 and we're trying to eat them all the time, that has a different impact on our body. So I alluded to this last week when we were talking about cancer risk and phytochemicals, and that when we start to take them, it really matters. The time frame, if our body acclimates and it becomes part of our biome, it becomes part of our genetic traits as far as a people group, that's when we're starting to see the most value. So the question will be, do we as Western women want to start taking in products that have some of these phytochemicals? And so ultimately, I think that the smart approach is to use them like food instead of using them like a supplement. And so what do you think I mean by that? Sorry?
Cook with it?
Yeah, eating them. So when we go back to Here, let me pull up another little picture here. When we go back to the whole idea of, and I'll get back to this in just a second. When we go to the whole idea of the Mediterranean pyramid, and this is where I was going to draw my pictures, but I want you to draw your picture on your notebook. What is the Mediterranean pyramid? Can you think of it? What goes in the base?
Fruits and vegetables?
Yeah. Whole grains, fruits, and vegetables go in the base of the pyramid. So make your big pyramid, and at the very base, it's eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. Yep, you got it. And so whether we come from European descent or we come from the Chinese culture or somewhere else in the world, the Indian culture, when we eat foods that are from our environment, so eating locally is kind of the phrase now, absolutely gives us an advantage. So we're not pre-selecting phytochemicals or phytoestrogens. We don't really have to even think of those terms. What we do want to do is really zone in on foods that naturally occur in our environment that have all of the wonderful ways that protect that plant from our environment. You with me? So from that base, what's the next one up in that pyramid? And you can look one up on your phone. Here, I'll do a really quick. We'll do a Google search, and we'll do oh, I'm probably not on the internet, so Mary, you might have to do it for me. If you look up Mediterranean pyramid, the next one up is they probably broke it down a little bit more detail, like it'll be grains and then vegetables, and then another notch up or so, it'll have fruit, and then it'll have fish. And so yeah, you go ahead and guide me. I'll let you guide me through what is the next one. There's one. Beautiful. The other thing I love about the Mediterranean pyramid is out on the outside of the pyramid, what does it have? Exercise. Does ours have that? Thank you, my dear. You are awesome. So exercise, drinking water, even a little wine. What did I mention? What phytochemical is in wine? Anybody remember?
Resveratrol.
Yes. Cool. Air high five. Resveratrol, which is, again, don't worry about the fancy term. It just happens to be one of the resources that have those isoflavones. So we can think of genistein, but we don't have to. We can just think of it as bright color gives us bright nutrients. So look at that. Even the one that Mary pulled up, which happens to be my favorite, Old Ways, is a great site. So yay for Mary for finding that one. It has exercise as the base of the pyramid. How cool is that? Which is why the divas, really are encouraging exercise. And even if you don't do formal exercise, being active. I read a study the other day that said, prehistoric, or we'll just say old ways of before desks and office chairs, what did people do when they were not busy hunting and gathering? They squatted. They sat down. They did yoga poses all day long just because that's what they did to relax. And so having a way to keep your body engaged is so valuable. And then the next up is the fish and seafood. And then the next up, which is smaller in that pyramid, is poultry and maybe a little bit of cheese and dairy. What I love about that category is with the cheese and dairy, it's really emphasizing the cultures or the active cultured yogurts and cheeses. When I spent time with a family in France, they loved to bring out their cheeses that were heavily fermented, aged, and so that strong flavor. And then on the very top, so once in a while, would we want to partake in red meats and sweets. So thank you so much for letting me borrow your phone. So I think what's valuable is when we understand that our doctors and our lifestyle can really come together on this idea, and that is to eat more from the earth and eating things that are grown and using our bodies and our skill to grow things that we can eat. Because now we know what soil they came from, and we know where the seeds came from, and really making sure that we've got every piece of that puzzle covered. Let's see, we might get that. the other piece of the puzzle is, if we have strong symptoms, do we want to try medicines or try something else? So my first recommendation is always going to be to look at your diet. We know that symptoms of, so hot flashes that are common in menopause, one of the easiest ways to kind of deal with that is to have good ventilation, dress in layers, but also to lower body weight. Because if you have high body weight, those heat flushes are much more exacerbated. And so we always go back to that same topic of, okay, well, how am I going to do that? What supplement do I use for that? And when we think of the whole picture and step away from the ideas of how Western ideas are for weight loss, and we think of, I'm going to eat when I'm hungry, I'm going to stop before I get full, and I'm going to stay active. So finding things that you love in your life rather than food might be a tool that helps. And Elaine knows the Thursday class at 7, we talk all about this. And it's an ongoing learning process. Don't feel like I have all the answers. But I do know that eating more plant-based, all of the clients and customers that I've helped over the last 30 years are amazed at how it changes their appetite when they eat more from the earth. They're amazed at how it improves their serotonin and their brain function when they eat more from the earth. Smoking gun really is that this little lady that I just started working with that is a cancer survivor, is a physician, is my age, so mid-50s, has struggled with depression, has tried every diet out there, and is a brilliant lady. So it's not that we don't have the knowledge, it's that we get confused by there's a plethora of misinformation out there. So I want to refocus a little bit here because I wanted to make sure I mention this great little website. Examinecom is one that I use a lot, and he gave us a great little summary. So, to kind of bounce back, remember when we are smart researchers, we want to find sources that give us direct access to data. So we need to learn how to read those placebo-controlled studies. And we also want to make sure that we get abstracts or summaries that are unbiased, because even the researchers that write the summaries can sometimes kind of put their influence in the summary. We can't help it. That's just human nature. So this group that puts together this website, Examine.com, they do not get paid by anybody except for the people that subscribe. So we can have confidence that a company's not paying them to be a little bit skewed. Don't talk about those datas, but just talk about these, because these are really good. They're still saying a truth, right, if they did that, but it would sort of be a half-truth because they didn't really give equal time to maybe point A. They really talk more about point B. So that's what I like about this group. So here, look at this. Red clover extract refers to any extract that is taken from the certain plant, and it's a good natural source of isoflavone molecules. There are a few brand names out there. They really refer to those isoflavones that I'd mentioned, the genistein and the daidzein, and they're very similar. So in some cases, those two chemicals will have a methyl form, so don't worry too much about all that stuff. But I want you to be familiar with those terms, because it can help us kind of sift through the gobbledygook that sometimes supplements will put on their labels. Quick little bunny trail. Remember when we talked about the mushrooms and the whole medium that the mushrooms were grown on were thrown in as the important stuff, the mycelium. Do you remember that? If you didn't get to see that video or that talk, it's so interesting too. The mycelium, as you look a little deeper, is really the dirt that the mushrooms are grown on, and really what you want is the flowering bodies. But they rely on the ignorance of the consumer, so they say loaded with mycelium. And when you find the right research, they say mycelium is that's recyclable stuff, that's dirt. You really only want the flower. But you wouldn't know that if you weren't going to be, if you didn't have a good resource to learn from. So again, the Examine.com is one that's kind of like that. So as we look a little deeper and we understand that there's some brand names, there's certainly going to be some treatment hopes that it's going to help treat menopause, even asthma, which I thought was interesting, this certain tea. It's also been touted to help with depression. Well, anybody, I think, that is wrapped around a warm cup of tea somehow has that feeling of calmness, feeling better. Something just magical about a warm beverage, right? So is there something about red clover that does do a change to our neurochemistry? Maybe, maybe not. When looking at research, though, we want to be able to really sift through the placebo effect and understand the real effects. So when looking at the research, there are indeed benefits in isolated studies relative to placebo, but there are also many failures indicating that supplementation is pretty unreliable. So kind of what I was saying. It may be in part due to differences in absorption or simply due to potential industry bias. Remember, I kind of mentioned that too. There may be a minor reduction in anxiety. Remember, from even just drinking a hot cup of tea just somehow makes you feel better. But, is it really perceivable benefit? And of course, if that's the case, it needs to be further evaluated. It should also be noted that most studies do report great benefit with supplementation, but the placebo effect per se is very prominent in studies. And so whenever we look at anything, even like the black cohosh and the St. John's wort, the placebo effect sometimes even just cuts the symptoms in half. So somebody's going to take black cohosh, somebody's going to take red clover, and someone's going to have the placebo. There's as much chance as the placebo person going, oh, my symptoms are almost gone. I have half as many symptoms as I do taking this. And then you uncover it and go, oh, wow, you had the placebo. The amazing thing is, though, placebo is not a bad thing. Because if we feel like it's better, sometimes it is better, right? And in fact, in my research when I was looking at ergogenic aids for athletes, it was amazing that even when somebody is taking a placebo, meaning they think that it's going to help them, they work out harder, they have less pain because they're just sure that pre-workout has helped them. So, I have to wonder, remember when we watched the video and we looked at some of the conditions that were related to a unhealthy gut biome? And remember that lady was laying on the chair and she was getting hypnosis, basically. And so the mind is so powerful that, yes, there is some impact from our gut. We're sure that that's there. But even if it's minimal, the power of persuasion is unlimited. And so it's really a value to realize that even if you are happy to spend the $40 on a product or $50 or $100, and there isn't a risk, and that's where your physician has to really help you to think, well, I'm going to still take it because it might help. Collagen, I have people taking that a lot, and they are just sure that it makes their hair grow and their nails grow better. And so who am I to say it doesn't work worth a darn? Right? Who am I to say? As long as we get past that risk of harm. And so I feel like that's, the most important piece. And so again, when I look at this Examinecom site, I really like the fact that, let's see if I can get rid of that. No. It gives us this little grid. And any site that gives us the data, level of evidence, outcome, magnitude of effect, consistency of research results, and notes, I think is really good. Then we can go directly to those studies that now point specifically to what is being interpreted in the summaries. So this might be more than you want, but when you're really burdened with a symptom and you want to find out information, and you're not okay with placebo effect, this is a way to really learn about it and understand what could I do to see the efficacy and see what my options are. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so let's go back to this little descriptor. I have one more. Oh darn, that won't open. I thought I had this one for the St. John's wort. Have you ever experimented, anybody want to share, any of the supplements? Mary?
Well, years ago, I was, under a lot of stress, and I thought, well, I've heard that St. John's wort has a mild antidepressant property.
Uh-huh.
So I took it, and I thought I felt good, and I took it for a long time until I had to take some kind of prescription medicine that didn't interact well with it. So I stopped it. And then more recently, I thought, well, I'll try it again because I wasn't taking that other medicine. And it made my blood pressure go up, which I think is probably an issue of age, because as we're older, a lot of medicines affect us differently. So I had to stop it because it was affecting my blood pressure.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
Interesting.
And there you go. So there's those harms. And sometimes we don't know about the blood pressure. That's what we call the silent killer, right? So often blood pressure can be high and you don't notice it. So how did you find out that your blood pressure was elevated?
I monitor it.
You do? Yeah, good.
Because for a while, years ago, I did have high blood pressure.
Ah, gotcha. So you wanted to check it, which is so prudent. And when we think about St. John's wort, I mean, again, there's some studies that show that it has some neat benefits. And, since menopause is a natural progression of the female body, we think, what did nature intend for us to do as we went through these stages? And certainly plants and teas are ways to get some of these benefits, but in a very more dilute administration. And so did you experiment? Was it a pill form? And do you remember, was it milligrams dosage or?
It was capsule, and I just looked at, in the higher quality supplement
Yeah.
area, and for what appeared to be a typical dosage. In fact, actually, I asked a doctor what would be the recommended dosage.
So
and he
good.
gave a suggestion, and but it just didn't work for me.
Gotcha.
Second time around.
Well, no, I'm so glad you brought that up. I have had other clients that have tried the black cohosh, and when they use it as a tea, they have good benefits, meaning that it seems like it kind of helps with the hot flashes. Of course, they use it iced, but the supplement form caused more problems. So, I think that's just a great way to think of it. Now, Elaine, I know you have quite a garden. Do you have any herbs growing there?
Yeah, I have a lot of herbs that I cook with all the time.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in growing some of this.
I
Black
know.
cohosh, if I can.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. There's no reason why we couldn't. Again, when we think of the cultivation practices, a rich, moist soil, organic matter, so you do want to have a good composting scenario. Raised beds work really well. I mean, we certainly can make a shade environment here in Texas. But I love the fact that it's a good pollinator. And when we want to make sure that we have something that is secured in nature, we want to make sure that it has the right soil and that it is a good pollinator. So I just think it's a really exciting one. I had another picture of a blue cohosh, and so I'm sorry I'm not going to get to show it to you, but beautiful plant. I was thinking, boy, I want that one in my garden. It has a beautiful round, brilliant blue bud, and it's the same idea where, you can use the leaves for a tea, or you can use the bud. So they have different flavors and ways to use them in a tea form. But the good thing too is that they are edible. So having them in a salad, when I've talked about changing the personality of your salad and really making it full of herbs, not just greens, really what that's doing is upping the polyphenols, or those healthy chemicals in the plant. Because remember, when even just with the bright red for red wine, the resveratrol, it's a concentrated form because it's coming from the berry of a plant that's a bright color. And so I love the fact that, wine has been part of the Mediterranean eating style for, thousands of years. And so it really has some purpose behind it. Yeah. So I think this one too is going to show the black cohosh leaf spots are caused by a certain bacteria. See how it's kind of brown there? And so again, it'll give you ways to improve on the growth factor and how to really make sure that it lives well. Hardwood bark, black cohosh seeds exposed to warm cold cycle before they germinate. So again, great for planting in the fall. Yeah, it reminds me of the whole process of green tea. When we talked about that topic in our videos, the Chinese culture is so good at using different types of tea. I think in this one, let me see if I can find it. It shows how, right here. I don't know if we can get that better. Inside of the herb dryer. What's so nice is when you use different parts of the plant, you're able to dry the herbs and use them throughout the year. So a lot of you know Judy Davis. She passed away sadly of cancer, but I'm still in good contact with her husband, Dennis, and so he still gives me bay leaves and lavender and thyme from her garden. And so I learned that it's absolutely critical to thoroughly let them dry on a flat, clean surface before you put them in the jar, because I had a few that got moldy, and I was so sad. So a drying surface will be really important. Purchasing the fresh black cohosh roots then can be included as well. So just like with the herbal teas, sometimes there's the berries, sometimes there's the leaves, and they can sometimes be heated, so cooked, which changes how the antioxidants are accessible to our bodies if the leaves are cooked versus just air dried or even sun dried. So so I think it's a really fun way to explore how we can get a safer concentration of these nutrients, as well as enjoying a plant-based or just more goodies from the earth. I'm not suggesting that you have to be vegan. Instead, I'm suggesting that we eat more from the earth and really using the leaves of the plant as well as the seeds and the roots. So